Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So you can see today is no cakes in front of me, no cake equipment. And what you also may have noticed is that I was absent for a few weeks over social media. And that's because I went on honeymoon. Oh my God, I had my first holiday in a very long time, but also had the most incredible trip with my new husband, Tal. And I've actually received loads of questions, how we organized it, what did we do, where did we go, because people may be planning the same trip or something similar. So I thought to do a little video blog or session just to explain our trip. I'm going to incorporate some photos and videos, and hopefully you'll find this video helpful if you are planning a trip or just entertaining because everyone loves hearing about other people's holidays. So we spent 10 days in Thailand and 10 days in Japan. Both countries we were desperate to go and see. Tal's actually visited Thailand before, but I've never been east, so it was a real adventure for me. And one thing which I did, which I highly recommend wherever you go in the world, keep a diary. Not a Dear Diary diary, just something to remember what you've done. So I'm actually gonna refer to it through this video, just to remind me exactly what I did, even though I know the general gist of it. So we started by flying directly to Thailand. So we landed in Phuket because we wanted to stay where the islands are, which is south, but people who want to visit north tend to fly to Bangkok. So the best part about landing in Phuket was that you actually fly really close to the sea because the runway is just behind a beach. So as you're landing in Phuket, firstly you can see the incredible landscape going on, but you're literally flying over people sunbathing. It's pretty insane. And then we got straight into a taxi to our first resort. So we decided not to actually stay in Phuket, but drive up and around to eventually where we were going to head towards Krabi. But we stopped on the way in somewhere called Phang Nga. Don't know if I'm saying this correctly. I am not speaking Thai. And the reason why we did this is a couple of reasons. Firstly, it looked more jungly and a bit more rural than Phuket because I think that's more built up and more built for tourists. But I have a slight fear of the ocean, and so most people travel by boat in Thailand, so I was trying to avoid boats as much as possible, which you'll see later, that didn't actually happen. Now this first resort I found on booking.com, it looked really nice, it was really reasonable. We had our own private villa, private pool. The only funny thing was that it was really empty, and we don't know if it was because it was a Tuesday or maybe not peak season, I don't know. Or everyone was just in their own villas, but we loved it. We felt like we had owned this resort, and the landscape was just insane. It was built on this river, and you can get boats, and there's these mountains in the background. We stopped off and saw monkeys. Like, already we weren't even there for a few hours, and I was already like, oh my God, I'm in paradise. We only stayed there for one night as a stopover towards going to Krabi. Now, what we didn't also realize is I suppose the lack of transportation in this area. So we ended up having to get a taxi to where we were going to Riley Beach. So that was potentially costing more than we were planning to spend because we weren't sure how the buses were running. We weren't gonna get a motorbike just yet. So we got this taxi. But in the taxi, we couldn't get to our next destination. We couldn't work out why it wasn't coming up on Google Maps because we had downloaded maps in advance. Turns out you can only get to Riley Beach on a boat. It's somewhere in the land, and it's like around cliffs. There are no roads there, so you have to go to a specific port and then take a boat. So in this car journey, I was like, okay, Georgia, you've got this. You know, it's the sea, you love the sea, it's great. Anyway, so we get to this port and got to where all these beautiful long boats are, you know, the typical Thailand boats with like the material hanging down, and I was like, okay, the sea looks great, this is gonna be fun. Little did I know, these boats go really fast, and I think they run on diesel, and they're so loud. So I had a little freak out, but it was only a 15-minute journey from the port near Krabi to Riley Beach, and we got to the beach, which was stunning. It's just this hidden cove with only a few hotels along the coast, and we stayed in the Riley Garden View. It was basically a collection of really cute, almost handmade bungalows that overlooked the sea. What we didn't realize was that there was about 80 steps to get up there with no lift. So we were a little bit hot and sweaty by the time we got to the top, but the view was worth it, and the bungalow was really amazing. A few things about Riley Beach. which I wasn't expecting. Firstly, the boats that took us there go on all night long. So it literally sounds like a helicopter is on your head until 2 in the morning. Didn't know that, and start again at 6. Also, it's backpacker central there. So Tal had been when he was traveling a few years ago and had a great time, so that's why we went back. But that was when he was a backpacker. Not that that was necessarily a bad thing, but that wasn't really the holiday we were there for. So you have this area which is like full of bars, restaurants, but it is all mainly for tourists. You can do things like boat tours, rock climbing, which we did. Could you believe I was up a cliff? From my side, I was expecting something a little bit more authentic and Thai. Now, I don't want it to sound like I really wasn't enjoying myself. I was. There are monkeys everywhere. The food is delicious. So we ended up staying there for 2 nights, even having bought earplugs. The noise was a little bit too much for me. And then we went to the other side of the mainland towards Koh Phangan. So you can get to Koh Phangan by speedboat or ferry. Thinking of my slight fear of the ocean, we opted for the ferry, which was slower and more relaxed and less bumpy. So we stayed in a port town called Don Sak. Now, I wanted my authentic experience. I got my authentic experience. How do I put this? There were no travelers, there were no tourists. It was just Tal and I. There was something incredible about it because there was no English anywhere. We had to use Google Translate. We found this restaurant that was on the sea. At first we were a bit like, we feel a bit out of place here, but actually one of the best meals I had in Thailand. The fish was so fresh. It felt like it was kind of just caught from the ocean and put on my plate there and then. It was really special, but we were only there for 1 night and then we got up early to get the ferry to Koh Phangan. So we woke up and got the ferry from the Don Sak Pier to the Thong Sala Pier, which was actually a really nice ferry ride. It took about 2.5 hours. We had internet, and so I watched something on Netflix. It was actually a really pleasurable experience, not bumpy or anything. And we arrived in Koh Phangan, and we had booked to stay at the Pan Viman Resort. So this island itself is quite small. It's only a half an hour ride from one side to the other, but it was far away from all the loud travelers and partygoers, and which is not why we were there. This was our honeymoon period. So this was 4 nights in this gorgeous resort with our own private pool. We walked in and we saw like the towels in swan shapes with petals over the bed, like super cheesy, but we loved it, and like little pastries. The ride there was a bit terrifying. If you've been to Thailand or any of these islands, they're literally like this, and people drive like maniacs. We were just like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, the whole way through. But we got there. They know how to drive there, so you're in good hands. And our resort was overlooking the sea. It was absolutely gorgeous. I really felt like I was in paradise. So we'd kind of done our traveling bit and now we were here to stay. And the idea in these islands is to do lots of water sports like snorkeling or even jet skiing or paddle boarding. But typical, the weather took a not turn for the worse, because I know Thailand gets really bad rainy seasons, but a storm came and then the sea was a little bit rough from when we got there to when we left. So we couldn't do any of the water sports that we had planned. We still got some sun. We still were able to relax. There's so much more on the island to do. We rented a moped as well. We ended up sharing one because I was too scared to drive, but Tal did a great job. And just going around on your little bike around the incredible scenery is just so special. From going to a bar in the middle of the nature to going to the other side of the island to see where more action was happening. We did stay in the resort quite a lot of the time, and only a couple of days after we got there, we realized that there was actually a whole high street next to us with shops and restaurants. And we were like, there is a bit of life on this side of the island. So we went there in the evening and we found this incredible restaurant owned by this amazing lady who cooks everything, who also offered cooking classes. So we learned how to make a pad thai, a tom yum soup, and a green curry, which obviously I went and bought all the ingredients straight away after coming back and have made all of them since, and it's so delicious. There were a few other little coffee bars, so we were actually still really happy and had this amazing relaxing time in Koh Phangan despite the water not being 100% okay. But we did have to get back to Koh Samui because we were going to be flying to Bangkok. So after our amazing time in the resort, we had to get the speedboat. Now, the fact that the speedboat had to go from another port because of the waves was already making me a bit nervous about the whole thing, but I was really brave. Luckily, there was a really nice English couple on the boat and I spent the whole time talking to them. We got to the other side, would you believe, and it was totally fine. So hopefully my fear of the ocean is long gone. And we went straight to the airport in Koh Samui because we were flying to Bangkok. Koh Samui Airport is the most beautiful airport I've ever seen. It's all outside. It's like a hotel resort in itself. It's got a few shops and just trees everywhere. People are just sunbathing on the grass before their flight. We had a couple of hours to kill. I wouldn't say go there for the whole day, but it was a pleasure flying from there. Now, in Bangkok, we only stayed there for one night. I think we could have done the whole of the rest of Thailand, but you would have needed a few more days and weeks even to see that all. But we did the 24 hours in Bangkok and we got a lovely tour guide, Chef Noi. So the fact that she's a chef, she knew a thing or two about food. So we did temple and food guide with her. And we spent about 6 hours all together seeing the most incredible temples in Bangkok. And it's one of those things that you see from far and you're like, wow, that's impressive. And then you go up close and you're like, oh my God. Like each tile on a building or statue has been placed or hand painted. Some of the buildings were made out of broken ceramics. It was just insane. So I highly, highly recommend doing a tour or visiting these temples in Bangkok. And then we went to all these local food markets and we were being led by Noi and she knew all the sellers. So we felt in really good hands. She was saying, try this, try this, try this. And it was a really, really amazing experience. And I think the highlight was just this meal at the end of the tour. We went to this restaurant. They didn't have any English speakers. The menu wasn't in English. You even had to write down what you ordered. So she did everything. And we just got the tastiest collection of food. I cannot tell you what we ate, but everything was just bursting with flavor. It was just the most incredible experience. So it sounds a little bit like, oh, I got a private tour, but I highly, highly recommend either joining a group tour or getting yourself a private tour guide because they will take you to the places that you would have never found just looking on general websites or anything. So Bangkok was the end of our trip in Thailand. By the time that came around, we were like, I can't believe we've already been here for 10 days and I can't believe we have another 10-day trip ahead of us going to Japan. So it's a 5-hour flight from Bangkok to the south of Japan, Fukuoka. And we actually did that overnight, which was great because we didn't waste a day on either side, but it made us tired for the next one. But we powered through. So from going from Thailand to Japan, we landed in Fukuoka. Again, I'm really sorry for my accents and the pronunciation of these cities. Now, the reason why we did this is nothing other than it was the cheapest flight to Japan from Thailand. And I was like, looking at the map before we planned the trip, going, why don't we land in Fukuoka and then work our way towards Tokyo where we're gonna be getting our flight home. This probably isn't the hub of tourism, but it was a great introduction to Japan, Japanese culture. The city is a well built up city and lots of people, but what we couldn't believe was the quietness. It was silent. There were no beeping horns, there was no crazy construction, there wasn't revving engines. Everyone was just getting on with their day. Drivers were being patient, waiting by crossings, and maybe this is how everything's meant to be, but we're just so used to chaos, and especially coming from Bangkok, where you're like nearly run over every 5 minutes. It was a really nice, like, this is Japan. So with Japan, before I get into what we did, there were a couple of things which we did before we came. So firstly, we ordered a Japanese rail card, which is a 7-day pass using all the bullet trains called the Shinkansen. And it also covers some other trains that are in specific cities. And once we had that, we were kind of free to make our own journeys whenever we wanted. Also, before we arrived at a city, we looked at a few blog posts, a few YouTube videos to see what was around and then just checked off what we like the look of and kind of went with it. So in Fukuoka, not a crazy amount to do, but a few shopping centres, a few central hubs, but there was one suggestion of going to the night food market. So a row of, let's say about 20 stands, a chef is cooking food in the middle, and then you have like a table going around where people are sitting, and you can fit about 12 to 14 people, nice and snug inside. We just picked one and ate there. Again, didn't really know what we were eating. We pointed to some pictures on the menu and it came. Wow. We got ramen, we got soup plus ramen, which was delicious. We got some little yakitori, which are chicken on a stick. We got some other things. And the funniest part is that there was a group of Japanese men who had probably been there for a while drinking beer, who tried to talk to us, but they couldn't speak English, and we obviously couldn't speak Japanese. They were trying to communicate. Anyway, at the end of the meal, they just go, "Here, take this." And they gave us 1,000 yen, which is the equivalent of $5. And we were like, what? No, we don't want this. He's like, take it, present. Anyway, it was really nice. And then they just walked off. And so I guess we got tipped for being tourists. So I'm not sure if that's normal or we were just lucky, but that was like a really nice, friendly introduction. And I think everywhere we went from after that, people were really interested to hear where we were from. And like, even though we couldn't quite communicate, we were like very welcomed there. So another thing about our trip was that all our hotels were booked in advance just to make it easier, so we know to get to a city and just go straight to this hotel. I personally based it on good reviews and location based on blogs that I was reading. None of them were crazy hotels with all this, I don't know, extra glam pools and everything. They were just pretty simple city hotels, but they had really nice little extras that I wasn't expecting. Firstly, they provide you with pajamas. So some of them were like 2-piece pajamas, or one was like this big robe, which we had. Secondly, all the complimentary toiletries. You had things like a hairbrush, razor and shaving cream, and hair ties, and all this stuff which you wouldn't be expecting, but you're like, that makes so much sense. Or a toothbrush everywhere we went. So it's all these little things were thought out for you, which we're just not used to wherever else we've visited and stayed. So that was like a really pleasant surprise. The hotel rooms themselves are on the small side, but I think that's very normal for Japan. And of course, they have the Japanese toilets. The best things ever. I'm not gonna go into too much detail about them though. So we were only in the city for the first night, and then we made our way to Hiroshima. So it was our first time on the bullet train. We selected the green car, which means, I don't wanna say first class because that sounds a bit poncy, but it had bigger seats. And we were thinking we were gonna spend quite a lot of time on trains, so it was worth paying the extra $50 or whatever it was to go onto the green car, which was also quieter. So what we like doing is kind of going around the station and buying food from all these different stands and then eating it on the train. So that was kind of our time to try all these different new treats. So whether it was like baked goods or some dumplings or God knows what else we bought, we really liked our train journeys. And obviously it cut the time in half than taking a regular train or bus or anything. So we went to Hiroshima, which was slightly busier than Fukuoka. So already we were kind of entering a little bit of a busier city. And the city itself is incredible. So obviously there was the horrific atomic bomb happening there in 1945, which totally flattened the whole place and further. So actually there was a bit of that in the background. When I personally arrived, I was remembering that, which was a little bit hard to kind of grasp the concept of. But you see this brand new city with life, but in the middle of the city is obviously the atomic dome. So this was the only standing structure which was directly under the blast that was left after the bomb went off. When you're standing in front of it, you get chills and you just can't quite comprehend what actually happened there. Now, Hiroshima has other things that it's known for, including something called okonomiyaki, which is this incredible food. It's kind of like a pancake with loads of cabbage and then different toppings on top. You can choose cheese, meat, whatever, egg, spring onion, and it's all sandwiched together and it's a total mess, and you eat it with like your own little spatula. And there's this specific building that has about 3 or 4 floors full of these different restaurants, all serving the same thing. That was quite incredible, and it was one of our favorite meals. So we actually really liked Hiroshima. We were only there for one night before we went to Osaka. So Osaka is one of the largest cities in Japan. I think a lot of flights go into there as well. And again, it was slightly busier than from the last city. So already we realized that we were building up our busyness until we got to Tokyo. So in Osaka, we stayed for 2 nights. By the time we were at Osaka, we had decided that we looked at these blogs and we were like, this sounds nice, but then we ended up just walking around and finding little gems of restaurants and little shops and referring to the map every now and then. But for us, that's where our fun was. It was stumbling across this sushi restaurant and going, oh, this looks interesting. And they're kind of going, come in. And we're like, okay. So I don't think we actually went anywhere that was actually recommended to us. We did find ourselves in a really cool bar, which had retro games like Nintendo, Sega, PlayStation, but from years ago. I found this Sonic game that I used to play when I was young, and I was like really in my element there. So that was fun, and we found that from a blog. So what to do in Osaka is really kind of up to everyone. Another thing which we realized we were doing is just walking around everywhere. So whilst we did use trains and buses every now and then, we like to be on our feet. It also helps you get to know where you're staying and the city, and looking at the map and seeing how far things are and then finding things on the way. That, again, that's what we did. But taxis are everywhere and quite reasonable as well. There's an amazing metro and bus system in all these cities as well. I haven't actually mentioned this, but in all of the cities, there are these incredible shrines. So a shrine is like that big red freestanding statue, and it usually leads into where a temple is, where people come and pray. Now, we didn't visit that many just because after a few we were like, it's getting a little bit repetitive. We saw famous ones, but like I said, I think these trips are kind of down to the individual. We saw a few shrines, but we were more interested in the food and the food markets, whereas some people go to every single temple and find that really interesting. So to kind of tell you exactly what to do would be wrong, because everyone's an individual and everyone enjoys doing different things. So from one of the days we were at Osaka, we actually got the train to Nara. So that is about a 20-minute, half an hour ride just outside of Osaka. And Nara is famous for their friendly deers. It was a really nice little villagey kind of city. And you go to this particular park where there are more shrines and temples, but it's full of deer. My grandma went 40 years ago and she goes, make sure you bow down to the deer, because they do it. And then I actually bowed down and they went. And I was like, oh my God, I'm obsessed. You can buy food to give them, and it's just like a really nice way of kind of being in nature, but also seeing another city. So I would highly recommend visiting Nara because it's really close to Osaka. It's also a short train ride from Kyoto as well, which we went to stay after Osaka. Kyoto is more authentic, old school Japan. It's where there are a lot of geishas. There's like old small alleys, like the buildings have like sliding doors to get in. So if you want your kind of authentic Japanese experience, highly, highly recommend Kyoto. And we went that step further and stayed in a ryokan. So a ryokan is a Japanese guest house. So the one we stayed in was kind of a little bit modernized. So we still had our own room, our own privacy. We didn't eat dinner in our room, which is typical for Japanese ryokans. And they also have baths on the roof. So we had like a private hot tub. So that was their take on it. But usually they have like this public bath that you book a slot and etc. We did sleep on the floor on mattresses, which was a great experience. The location itself was in Gion, which is where all the older area is. We were a little bit further from the center of Gion, so we had to walk quite a lot. But again, it depends what you're there for. Some people stay more towards the center of like the shopping, for example, or towards the train station, which isn't a bad idea because then you have to worry less about getting to your accommodation. But we were in quite a quiet area as well, which we quite liked. Now, Kyoto is full of things to do. You can spend a week there. So much food to explore. There's nature, there's walks all around. We did a monkey trail and a bamboo forest, plenty of shrines. We didn't get around all of them. By this point, Tal was like, no more shrines, please. So one of our favorite Kyoto experiences was this one particular sushi restaurant. When we went to the monkey park, we were starving. And I simply opened Google Maps and saw that there was a sushi place nearby, and we started walking and we got to like this very residential area. We were like, where is it, where is it? And found this tiny little sign, and he welcomed us straight away, asked where we were from, what did we want, got some sushi. Now, I'm not too experimental with what I eat, especially with raw fish, so we stuck to salmon, tuna, and shrimp. This sushi was just the most incredible thing. I think it helped being in his store. He had been there for 45 years making nigiri, which is a pillow of rice with some fish on top. Only that for 45 years, no wonder it was this good. That's all we ate. But the way he handled the fish, the speed in which he prepared the rice was just incredible, and it was definitely one of our favorite moments. It was a slow-paced city, which was great because our last stop was Tokyo. Now, when I think of Japan, I think of this crazy, futuristic, amazing, high-tech place, and Tokyo is obviously the center of it. It was definitely the busiest. I've never seen so many people. You could tell it's the center of everything. The metro system's incredible. You can tell where the offices are, etc. But I think having lived in London and now living in Tel Aviv and all these other cities all over the world have kind of caught up, I guess, with Tokyo. So maybe like a few years ago, maybe 10 or 20 years ago, Tokyo was like this futuristic high-tech city, but I feel that other cities have kind of also become that now. So it was kind of futuristic, but also quite old school as well. I don't know, I think I was imagining like flying cars, which I didn't see. But Tokyo itself was a great city, lots to offer. We did this amazing light art gallery museum when we got there. We were just walking for hours and hours on end. The best part about Tokyo was that we saw big cherry blossom trees. The thing about when we got to Tokyo, and this was purely from our side, was that we had done Thailand for 10 days. We had now done Japan for 8 days. We were exhausted. It was like our legs, you could now feel the 20,000 plus steps a day in our legs. And we were, I think, so overwhelmed by Tokyo at first, then we actually decided not to try and visit absolutely everywhere in Tokyo. So we saw the main sites like the Shibuya crossing, which is the busiest crossing in the world. We also went to a park and where we saw the cherry blossoms, and we went to some shopping districts. What I think I would have loved to have done is potentially stay a few more days and go to Mount Fuji, which was covered in clouds on the way, so I couldn't see it. But I would have loved to have been in a little bit more nature, maybe before Tokyo. But Tokyo itself is obviously a must-see if you've never been. So I feel like I've raced through the 3 weeks that I was away, but I think I've spoken a lot as well. But all in all, whether it was Thailand and Japan, I think I can just give you this advice. Plan, it just takes the stress off. Read what others have done and personalize it to your interests 100%. Whether you're reading blogs, whether you're listening to this video, whether you're seeing other YouTubers or reading The Lonely Planet, see what interests you, but 100% leave space for when you get there, because you don't know how you're gonna feel when you get to the place. Maybe someone you meet will recommend something if you're on your way to something and then see something else. So plan kind of whereabouts you're gonna go, but don't plan everything in concrete. In Japan, obviously book the rail pass in advance. That's actually really important. You have to get it delivered to your home before you get to Japan, especially because it's a lot cheaper as well. And keep your diary, because I wouldn't have been able to do this without this. And it's just scribbling down things at night. But other than that, if you decide to go to Thailand or Japan, you are always welcome to send me a message on Instagram asking for recommendations, or right below this video, and I will try my best to get back to you because I'm more than happy to help. I am definitely going to revisit these countries. It was just the most incredible experience. The food is amazing. I have never tasted fresher sushi than I did in Japan. And yeah, that was my honeymoon. So I hope you found this helpful, enjoyable to watch. God knows what I've spoken about, but it was an incredible trip, had the best time. And if you're planning on going there, firstly, I'm very jealous because I want to come with you, but also I hope you have a fantastic time too. I will be back soon with more cake and baking tutorials, so stay tuned and we'll see you very soon.